So now that we've looked at the drivers, let's take a look at sources of various advantages. So as we look at sources of advantage, there are going to be firm-specific advantages and geographic types of advantages that we'll consider. In terms of firm-level factors, when we think about going internationally, we want to literally look at the internal assessments we've done in previous types of strategic analyses, the VRIO assessment and whatnot. So if I'm thinking about going abroad, I'm going to want to know, well, can I compete effectively abroad? And that's going to be asking questions like, if I have the knowledge to compete abroad, do I understand the market abroad? Do I have the culture to go abroad? Are people able to work with foreign partners, foreign colleagues, foreign customers, and whatnot? And also, do I have the VRIO, so strategic resources, to effectively compete abroad? And this is kind of an internal assessment of firm-specific sources of advantage that I can have. If I say, yes, I'm going to go abroad, do I have an advantage? Now, we also have advantages from the place. And these are identified in two ways. The first is what's called a locational advantage around where I currently am. So if I look at the country of where my operations are, do they provide me some sort of a locational advantage? Are countries, our nations, or our economic zones providing an organization with a specific advantage or not? And Michael Porter looked at this with the competitive advantage of nations when he asked questions. Well, do certain nations offer, or certain zones offer, a company an advantage? And the other way we can get a country-specific advantage or geographic advantage is through having an international value system where we can source resources, where we can build our product using specific advantages that are offered to us by different locales. So let's take a look first at Porter's diamond model of national advantage. Now again, what Porter was trying to do here was to investigate to what extent countries offer firms a certain advantage because the firm is in that country. So Porter's model suggests that locational advantages may stem from local factor conditions, local demand conditions, related and supporting industries, and from local firm strategies. And we're going to dive into these different aspects. Now, bear in mind, the idea here is for us to understand, if you are if you're an organization, what type of advantages can you expect to have from a certain home country, from your home country, and how can these be exploited internationally? If you're based in France, for example, and you decide to go abroad, is the fact that you're based in France give you an advantage for going into certain markets abroad? If your company is based in Italy, does being based in Italy give you a specific advantage over other firms in order for going international? So to what extent does your home country locale, the fact where your country is based currently, give you a particular advantage? And this is what Porter tried to investigate. So let's take a look at some of these different conditions. The first are what we call factor conditions. So factor conditions looks at factors of production. So certain factors of production in a nation may provide a certain advantage. For example, if you go into some of the northern European countries, or if you go to North America, energy is very, very inexpensive. And so if your production relies a lot on energy, well, being based in North America, being based in some of the northern European countries, or for electricity, for example, in Canada, this is providing you with an advantage. Also, language skills. Language skills, being able to speak multiple languages, may give your company an advantage, and that's the case in Switzerland. Switzerland natives of Switzerland speak 2, 3, 4 languages, and as a result of that, this gives them an advantage in the international banking arena. So the first potential advantage you get from your country, from your home country, could be that it provides you with specific factors of production that are advantageous over your competitors. And I've already mentioned the ones for mountain plantations and coffee. The second would be demand conditions. So demand conditions are looking at, for example, to what extent your domestic customers create a market or create a demand that is very, let's say, demanding, very sophisticated. And if you've got a sophisticated customer, if you got a very demanding customer nationally, that will prepare you for international competition. So if you go to Paris or Milan, you have a very, very sophisticated fashion buyer. And because those customers in your home market are so demanding on you, this actually allows you to become better abroad. The need for rugged outerwear in Canada. Canada, we know, have very rugged and difficult winters. Well, as a result of that, producers of outerwear are in face of a demand or have a very demanding client for the quality of products. Well, if you can meet that demand locally, if you can satisfy that very, very sophisticated and demanding customer, well, then you can certainly meet the demands in other countries. Singapore is another one. The Singaporean culture is very much oriented towards the quality of service. If you look at the Singapore airport, if you go into Singapore itself, how cleanly it is and how service-friendly everything is. This gives an advantage to Singapore-based companies when service quality is extremely high. And a really good example would be Singapore Airlines, which is meeting the demands of its local culture, obviously this high service-oriented culture, but because of it, they're able to provide they're able to be a better player in the international market. Let's look at related and supporting industries. So sometimes in a country we'll have clusters of related and supporting industries. These are sometimes called ecosystems or, like I said, clusters. And their coexistence support the performance of a particular industry. A good example of this is the leather industry in northern Italy. We see a whole bunch of different markets, different micro-industries established around the leather industry in northern Italy. And by having a shoe production or leather couch production in northern Italy, you actually have an advantage because there's a lot of know-how and resources clustered in northern Italy. The same is true with high-tech and software. If your company is based in the Silicon Valley in California, this gives you an advantage because you're with other related and supporting industries so that you can have an advantage. And lastly, the structure, the strategy, and the rivalry that exists in your industry in your home country. So, for example, we know that German companies invest in technical excellence. And so this gives them an advantage. This is a characteristic of the industry and how the competitive game is played in Germany, and it gives them an advantage. The same is true with Japanese car manufacturers. If you look in Japan, there are many automobile manufacturers in Japan. So the structure of the industry in Japan, meaning there's a lot of competition in Japan in the automobile sector, basically makes it so there's a lot of innovation. Because of high levels of competition, they're very prepared to go abroad. It keeps them on their toes, if you will. They have to maintain their competitivity and their competitive advantage. And so the fact that this is a very competitive market is an advantage for a Japanese firm. And by having their home in this highly competitive market has prepared them to become a more international company. So if Porter's diamond model allows us to understand the advantages of our home country, we can also take a look beyond our home country and start looking at advantages that we can obtain from having an international value system, where we place our activities or parts of our activity in different countries, in different locales, where the value can be the highest. So if I can put parts of my operations in one country and parts in another and parts in another, maybe I can create a competitive advantage due to the fact that each of these countries offers a specific advantage. Global sourcing is an example of this, where we're purchasing services and components from the most appropriate suppliers around the world. If I can choose where I get inputs from, I'm going to go to the country that makes the highest quality, maybe the highest quality for the lowest price inputs. Global sourcing is a way to create an international value system. If you're doing many companies today are very international, and if you have for example, after sales service office, or if you have a call center, sometimes these call centers are not in the home country. You're going to globally source that service to the people that do it best at the best cost, at the best price. So there's three things to consider here in terms of internationalization and locational advantages across a value system. So again, I'm building value, I'm creating value across a value chain, and now I'm asking myself, well, should I maybe put certain parts of this process in different locales, and to what extent that can bring value? First off, we know that certain specific places give cost advantages. I can have low wages in specific countries, and we've already seen this in the example that I mentioned about, for example, you can have textile workers, low cost, you can have lower costs and better efficiency, for example, for call centers in different countries. So some countries offer us a cost advantages for certain parts of my value chain. We can also have unique local capabilities. If I'm a global pharmaceutical company, I may want to establish a lab and put my R&D where other companies also do R&D in bio and pharma. It's a good example is the city of Boston, where there's just tons of bio and pharma labs around the city of Boston, and this gives my company obviously an advantage as well. I can take advantage of this unique locale and the unique capabilities that locale provides me. And I can take advantage of national market characteristics. I could potentially build high-end automobiles in one country and low-end in another. For example, I can build, Renault has done this pretty well. They've taken advantage of local market and local industrial characteristics to produce Dacia, the low-end model of automobiles. They're primarily produced outside of France, and the Renault Nissan line is not produced in the same countries. They're produced in other countries. So national market characteristics allow me to produce differentiated products at differentiated costs as well. All right, so now I've looked at the drivers. We've looked at some of the advantages that countries can offer my international strategy, what my home country can offer me, but also what I can get from various other countries as I build my value. So let's take a look at what are the basic international strategies that are offered to any company. So the first thing we need to know is that this is a careful balancing act we have to solve. When we go international, we have to keep an eye on global integration. We're trying to become global to get some benefit from it. We're trying to integrate all of our activities and coordinate them for some sort of operational efficiency. If I'm setting up part of my operation in one country, part of it in another, part of it in another, it's to gain some efficiency, to get something out of it. If I didn't get something, if there wasn't any benefit, then I wouldn't do it. To get that benefit, I need to integrate all of these things. I have to coordinate all these activities. And that's just part of being a global company. Now, the other side of this is that if I become extremely globally integrated, maybe I'll be less responsive to local needs. So I can have global integration, but I have to balance that with local responsiveness to specific regional or country differences. So if I'm totally globally integrated, I have a completely homogeneous product, well, I'm not meeting local needs. And if I'm totally locally responsive and defining my product and my service offer completely locally, then I'm not integrated globally, and I don't have any advantages of scale because every product is different in every market. So you have to balance both of these. And associated with this is, the global-local dilemma. The extent to which products and services may be standardized across national boundaries or need to be adapted to meet national markets. If you take a look at a flat screen TV is a perfectly good example of a global product. That product is about the same in about every market in the world today. However, if you go look at the products offered by McDonald's is adapting its products to the local market. If you go to Asia, you'll find a mixed shrimp, for example. They have hamburgers. They're not hamburgers. They have sandwiches made with shrimp patties. You can't find that in a lot of Western McDonald's. So they've basically adapted their product to the local market. So this dilemma, this idea of globalization but localization exists, and it's something we have to address as we go international. So there's 4 international strategies that exist. There's 4 basic international strategies that exist. And these 4 international strategies are represented along 2 axes. The first are these pressures for local responsiveness, being local, responding to local needs with your product. And either that's weak or strong. We're either in a situation where, oh boy, I really got to meet a domestic need. Otherwise, I really can't compete, or it's weak. And we also have pressures for global integration and global efficiency. They can be weak or they can be very strong. I'm in a company where, hey, you know what, I've got to have production over the globe. Otherwise, I'm not going to have efficiency in production. So we've got this pressure to become global, and we have the pressure to respond to local needs. And our 4 different ways to become international find themselves in this space. So the first is going to be the export strategy. This is where the pressure for local responsiveness is very weak. I can export my product to any country and it's accepted, for example, and there's no need for me to establish production or distribution in the country. I produce and I do everything locally, and I just export it, and I don't need to be globally integrated to do this. This is the basic export strategy. So what I'm doing is I'm leveraging my home country advantages that I've defined abroad. So I have, maybe production advantages. I'm producing my product here, and I just export it, and I send it off to a distributor in a foreign country. This is good if you have a strong reputation and a recognized brand and distinct capabilities. The risk here is that local competition can better respond to local needs. It's very obvious. And a good example is probably Google. Google has a product that, looks like it can work just about anywhere, but it can't. And it doesn't respond to the need in China for a lot of reasons. And Baidu responds better to that local need. So export strategy can work, and we'll talk a little bit more about exporting later on. We're going to leverage our unique advantages we have in our home country. It's the simplest model, and it's the model that maybe a lot of companies actually start with. The second model is the multi-domestic strategy. So this is basically saying that I have an international firm, and I'm going to have multiple domestic operations. I'm going to have my Chinese operations. I'm going to have my Japanese operations. I'm going to have operations and units in Asia, etc. So I basically got a company, but little itty bitty companies all around the world with different offerings in production and a high degree of autonomy in every one of these countries. There are zones, for example. So McDonald's again is doing this. McDonald's Canada, McDonald's Japan, McDonald's China, McDonald's France, McDonald's Germany, etc. And each of these companies sources its own potatoes, for example. It sources meats locally. It defines its products locally. Yes, there are some standard products, but a lot of times the products, even between the United States and Canada, the products can be quite different. So the risk, obviously, here is going to be dilution of brand and reputation and inefficiencies. My brand, what does it really mean? What does the McDonald's brand mean in Japan? And does it mean the same thing in Canada? And does it mean the same thing in Germany? Because I'm adapting my product to each local market, my brand, McDonald's, doesn't mean the same as I move from one country to the next. Now, there are generic products offered in McDonald's, and it helps maintain the brand identity, but there's a risk that it's diluted. And also inefficiencies, obviously. If you're doing things n number of times and multiplying it locally, there's no coordination overall, and there could be things that could be coordinated internationally, and you're not doing it. The global strategy, well, we already mentioned this. This is where we have an organization that basically says the world is my marketplace, and I produce everywhere. I mean, my company has, let's say, R&D in one country. We have production in this country. We capture location economies worldwide. We disperse our value chain. We have a standardized product, basically, to capture scale economies. And we market to the world. IKEA is a pretty good example. I mean, their products are pretty standard. They have local operations. They have productions in one space. They have service in another space. They have service locally. It's a commodity-based product, and this is where it works the best. The risk of this globalization strategy, this global strategy, is reduced flexibility from standardization. I've standardized everything. What happens if I want to meet a specific demand in a local market? Well, I can't. Now, IKEA is starting to adapt its offer a little bit to local market pressures. They have to. At some point, if you start to lose customers, you have to adapt. But the true global strategy, that's not what it is. It's towards more standardization. Pardon me. And the last of our strategies is what's called a transnational strategy. And this is kind of like the getting the best of both worlds type of strategy. It's extremely complex. We're trying to create an organization that can respond to local needs, but also provide us with efficiencies that we can get from global integration, so scale economies as well. So we're being both efficient in what we do, and we're being effective in the various markets. It's extremely complex. You can think of this transnational strategy maybe as saying, well, you know what, we're going to do our primary activities in the country, and the supporting activities of our business may be, for example, the learning and development services, the R&D services, may be positioned in specific areas around the world. So, hey, you know what? We're a transnational company. We've got sales going on in all countries. We have local offices taking care of sales, but we also have our R&D, which is based in San Francisco. We also have global learning and development and HR management to facilitate transfer of people from one country to another if they want to move. So basically, we're producing and operating to meet local conditions, but we're leveraging learning and innovation across the entire organization. We're trying to take things that should be centralized and done the same across all parts of the organization are done centrally and done across the organization. And things that are local are left to the local need. This is really difficult to implement. Very, very difficult to implement. Organizations like Starbucks are tackling this type of strategy today. They've created a value chain that uses certain advantages offered by different countries, specifically in sourcing the products. But then they also have product ranges and local adaptation as a function of where you are.